Are you ready to become the dad you were meant to be? Good, because this is the Epic Dad Legacy Podcast, where imperfect actions are better than perfect ideas, promises kept are more important than promises made, and nothing happens unless you make it happen. My name is Drew, father of three, the founder of the Epic Dad Company. My mission is to help dads up their game and become the husbands, fathers, and men they're called to be. We need epic dads now more than ever. And it is your responsibility and obligation to become the best father you can be and show your kids what is possible. Listen in for weekly tips, strategies, and actions you can take to go from average dad to epic dad. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the episode. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Epic Dad Legacy Podcast. This is your host, as always, Drew Camp, the founder of the Epic Dad Company. Hey, thank you for being here. If this is your first time, we are a show that is committed to helping to change the culture by helping dads level up and become the husbands, fathers, and men they're called to be, because we know that our culture desperately needs it. And intentional and present fathers that actually lead their families is what is missing from our society. And so that is our mission. That is what we're focused on doing. We bring on high-performing dads on the show every week. It could be in the areas of fitness, finance, faith, relationships, you name it. And we want to have a discussion with them about what they are doing and how we can emulate it and get very tactical and practical about the steps we can take to level up in our life as a dad. And today, guys, we have got on a great guest. And I'll hop into that in 2 seconds. But first, if you've been listening to the show, we've been kind of teasing something that we have going on here that we're super excited to announce today. And it is called the Epic Dad Crew. Now, the Epic Dad Crew is our online community of like-minded dads where we're all holding each other accountable. We're supporting each other. We're challenging each other to really become the absolute best fathers that we can be. Because us dads are stubborn, right? We feel that we have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders alone, that we can't ask for help because we'll look weak. We don't look to anybody for support, or, sometimes we may feel embarrassed, right? Because the problems that we have, it looks like everybody else has got it together. That's not the case. And getting plugged into a community with other men that are on the same mission with you is the unlock to fueling your growth and fulfilling your potential. There's a cliche, but cliches are for a reason. It is that you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with most. So if you're not where you want to be, you need to change your environment. You need to change the people that you're hanging out with. You need to get around others that are going to challenge you. They're going to push you. They're going to hold you accountable to becoming the type of man that you say you want to be. And so if this sounds like you, then we would love to help. The Epic Dad Crew would love to help, and we would love for you to join our online community. So inside the crew, you're not only going to get access to fitness programming, to nutrition resources, to accountability groups, to weekly meetings, but you're also going to get immediate access to what we call our Epic Dad Build Your Foundation course, which is going to walk you through our Epic Dad framework, which if you've listened to the last episode, we talk about the Epic Dad framework is the blueprint for how to become an epic dad. So inside the foundations course, you're going to get extreme clarity around your identity and your values, your vision, your mission. You're going to start learning how to get momentum, right? So if you're feeling stuck, we're going to talk about how to build the right type of habits, how to hold yourself accountable to those habits, and really how to create discipline in your fitness and your nutrition that is going to help you level up in every other area of your life. Now, the crew is by application only. So if you are ready to level up, if you are ready to start making some changes, if you've looked in the mirror and you are not where you want to be as a dad, then I am going to invite you to hit the link in the description, fill out a quick application, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing if it is a good fit. So that is the big announcement, guys. We've been working on the Epic Dad Crew in some fashion for probably the last year and a half. And I feel like we finally hit the nail on the head. We've got it right. We have built this amazing community, and I would love to have you join and create some drastic positive changes in your life and let us help support you become the husband, father, and man that you are called to be. Okay. So today's episode, guys, I have on Mr. Reed Moore. So Reed is the lead pastor at the church that my family attends, which is Gwinnett Church here in Georgia. And Reed, what can I say? Reed is awesome. Gwinnett Church is kind of under the umbrella of Andy Stanley. So some of you guys might have heard of Andy. Andy is an incredible pastor, and he leads this huge congregation that's made up of these separate churches that are kind of localized in the community. And Reed leads this one called Gwinnett Church. And so sometimes when I'm there, it's Andy talking. He gives a great message. But there's just something about Reed. Reed is young. He's 38, so he's about my age. And so that might be why I resonate with him so much, and our family resonates with his message. And I think that he just brings a different tonality, kind of a different approach to the church. And it's incredible. So I wanted to have Reed on and really get his perspective on a few things that I've been struggling with personally in my faith journey, and really how we as dads can step up, be the leaders in our home, in our faith journey, right, with our children. And so Reed and I have a great discussion here. We really talk about what the Bible says about manhood. What does it mean to be a man? What does it also say, that we should be doing as a father? And what examples do we have to look to, as a father? And so Reed and I get very tactical and practical on that. We also talk about, with us accepting that we are the leader in our faith in the home, is what does that look like? Like, for real, what does that look like when we get down with our children? How can we make sure that we are teaching the right values, that we are having intentional conversations with them, about God, about Jesus? And so we get really, really tactical and practical about steps that you can take, every day, right, to make sure that you are teaching those values. And so, guys, you are going to love this episode. A lot of times what we do as dads is we just say, hey, we're going to leave that to mom, right? And we do this in a lot of things. We do this with school, right? A lot of us dads are not involved in school. Kind of let mom handle that one. We're not, exactly going to PTA meetings. That's mom's business. We typically outsource any type of doctor's appointments or doctor's visits, to mom as well. And one thing that we definitely outsource is church and faith. And so we know that we need to be the leaders of our family, and we need to accept responsibility for leading our family. And part of that is accepting the responsibility that you are the leader in your home for your family's faith. And so if that's something you guys are interested in, you are going to love this episode with Reed. And with that, guys, we will hop into today's episode. Reed, what's up, my man?
Doing well.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to get this on the books, man. We had this, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, and had to push it back. And it's a conversation I've been looking forward to a ton, man. So glad you're here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to being on here, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. So just to give the guys some context, so Reed is the lead pastor at Gwinnett Church, which is where my family goes. And I tell you what, man, every time that you're on the docket, to be, the presenter, the preacher, we look forward to it.
I appreciate it, man.
Nothing against Andy, Andy's like, he's the GOAT for sure. But we just resonate with kind of the way that you approach, your message. Obviously we're similar in age, so I think it hits home a little bit closer, for us as being a young family. So
I appreciate that, man. Thanks so much.
Dude. Yeah. But for the guys that don't know you, man, just kind of, if you wouldn't mind, just give a little bit of backstory on kind of what you're doing now. And then I'm sure we can dive into your story, of kind of, childhood, getting to where you're at right now. And then I'd love to really dive in and kind of talk, what does fatherhood look like from a biblical perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah. So I'm a dad. Been married 14 years this month.
Okay. Congratulations.
Yeah. So the 20th of this month. So that'll be 14 years. We got 3 kiddos. I got a 9-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy, and a 3-year-old boy. And man, it's wild. And then pastor in a church, been the lead pastor here at Gwinnett Church for in October, it'll be year 3.
Okay. Cool, man. When did you guys get married then? Because I don't know how old you are, but I think we're about the same age,
we got married. So I'm 38. We got married right. I mean, I'm talking like right when we graduated.
Yeah.
Okay. So I graduated first, went and got a place in Snellville, Georgia. Where everybody's somebody, dude. Yeah, exactly. And so that's where I was working at the time, was a Methodist church. I was a youth pastor. And so we knew we were going to live there, and we were engaged, but she still had a little bit of school left. So like right when we graduated, we got married.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I got married young as well. So it'll be 13 years for us in November, and I'm 37, right? So about the same path. And it's funny. So I proposed while I was in the Army. So I graduated, joined the Army.
Yep.
My wife's a little bit younger than I am.
Yep.
So she actually dropped out of college, and we got married and like moved, to Fort Bragg, and it's been cool. And actually I was on a podcast last week talking about marriage actually. And one of the things that was brought up was like, hey, you guys have been married for a long time. You're so young, like what's worked? And I'm like, well, one, I think I just got lucky because I was like too young to have those like really like conversations you're supposed to have,
Totally.
I think. But then also it's just really cool to get married young because you grow so much with your partner, right? It's not like you're coming at it from like two different life perspectives. It's like you come together early and you grow together, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, totally. So Tim Keller, are you familiar with Tim Keller?
Is he like Keller Realty?
No. So Tim Keller was a theologian. He just passed away this year, and he wrote a book called The Meaning of Marriage. And he talks about one of the cool parts about marriage is that you learn to love the stranger because you're constantly growing together, and who you start with 14 years in is not who you're with anymore. You know what I mean? Like hopefully you're both growing and you're transforming, and so you learn each, as the years go on, you learn to love this new person. You know what I mean? Like, so like that is part of the adventure of marriage, man. So I love that you talk about you grow together. So it's cool.
Yeah. Well, I want to, if you're open to it, I'd love for you to kind of tell your story of how like you got to being a pastor, because it wasn't always like, you growing up at the church and like, rah Jesus all the time.
Right.
So and you told that story, I don't know, it must have been a month or two now, kind of your personal story. I'd love to hear that, man, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was like Catholic school kid, you know what I mean? Like, and so she had like a faith foundation, but like we weren't like church people, you know what I mean? Like we weren't like we went to mass and stuff like that with her. My dad wasn't Catholic, so he couldn't even participate like in Catholic services. And so so it was like one of those things where it was like faith was like, I don't know, it wasn't a big deal for us growing up. And then my dad, and he and I have had lots of conversations about this, so if he ends up listening to this, he knows. But my dad was an alcoholic growing up. He drank on the weekends. We went to church with mom, but not really that often. And then when he got in some trouble with DUIs and got arrested, and when that happened, my mom started looking for help. And so she starts looking for help in some places, and she finds some recovery meetings, some Al-Anon, Alateen meetings at a Methodist church. And she ends up getting into this church, and she hears about a personal relationship with Jesus and grace for the first time. And so she's all in, right? And church kind of really like takes on a new role in her life. And so that was like a turning point for her, where she starts, I think, probably praying and trying to emulate faith in our house. So it was like, I can remember seeing my mom like reading her Bible in the mornings and going to Bible studies and things like that, but still wasn't my thing. And kind of just really wasn't my thing. And then got to college and did what college freshmen do, man, and just lived it up, I'm just doing whatever. And then came back from my freshman year of college to get a summer job. And my parents, they were like, you're not going to sit around in the basement and play Xbox all summer. They're like, get out there and make. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, all right, cool. My mom told me there was a guy at church that owned a landscaping business and that I could go work with him. And I was like, all right, like, I guess that's cool. I can mow grass, take my shirt off, flex my muscles, whatever. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And just so happened that this guy was a legit believer in Jesus, a legit follower of Jesus, I would say. He was just the real deal, man. And he wasn't pushy or weird about it, but he talked about God like God was somebody he knew. And he talked about his faith like it was a regular part of his life. It was so different than anything I'd ever seen, than most of the Christians that I knew. And so I was intrigued, I would say, by this guy. And he just talked to me about Jesus. He talked to me about faith. He'd offer to pray for me. showed me grace, man, when I was a hot mess all that summer, still going to parties and stuff and then showing up late for work. And by the end of that summer, he's invited me to Bible studies 1,000 times. I haven't gone to any of them. I felt like I owed it to him to go to this like event, he's like, my mentor is going to be speaking. And I was like, fine. So I ended up going, man. And when I went, that person just read my mail, if you will, like if you've ever felt like, man, somebody's just speaking and they're like saying they're hitting all the points that are your tension points, and at the end of the message, they did like an altar call type deal, heads bowed, eyes closed type deal. If you've been around church, people listening, but I got up and people, I think, thought I was going to walk to the front, and I walked out. And people were like, no, I walked out because I didn't want to get emotional in front of these people I didn't really know. He followed up with me, ended up talking to me. I still had lots of questions, and in that process, by the end of the summer, I'm about to head back to the University of Georgia, and as I'm about to head back, he was like, "Man, I just got to know where you're at with Jesus." And I was like, "Oh no, he's asking the question." And I remember telling him, man, I was sitting in his truck and I said, "I don't think God loves people like me." And I'll never forget, dude, he pulled over on the side of the road and he's like, "Look at me." Cause I was looking at the floorboard of his truck, and he said, "You're exactly the kind of person God loves." And he's like, "He only loves and welcomes sinners and broken people." So he's like, you're it, bro. And I believed him, man. I believed him. I think, I've talked about this before, but I believed that was true because I'd seen it in that guy. I had seen the tangible love of God. We talk a lot at our church about it's hard for people to believe in the love of an invisible God if they don't witness it in visible people. You know what I mean? And so for me, man, I had seen it in a person and he had shown me that love. And so it made that love all the more believable. And so, man, I jumped in, submitted my life to Christ, started following Jesus, and then that was like the beginning of all of it for me, getting into, from there it was sign me up to serve. And then he's, bought me a Bible, read the stuff in red, do what it says, what I mean? And that was the entry, to ministry for me, man.
Yeah. Dude, that's a powerful story, man. I want to pull on the thread a little bit about your pops too. Like not everybody listening to this is going to be a person of faith, and that's fine. That's fine. Totally. But I think there are so many things that we can try to emulate and that the Bible teaches us as to how we should be living as a father. Yep. And one of those is that kind of, unconditional love, right? And letting your child know that they are accepted, right? Like no matter what.
Yep.
And so like, how did that play on you from a faith perspective with your dad, not kind of being that leader, taking you to church and things? Like, do you think that played a big role in kind of your path,
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, and again, like I said, my dad knows this, like early on for me, part of the reason why I didn't go to church is I thought if dad doesn't go, then I don't have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so for me, it was like, because mom was the one dragging us to church, I'm just being fully like faith felt feminine. You know what I mean? It felt like that's a girl thing. And there's nothing wrong with strong women in our lives. And thank God for the moms that pray for us and take us to church and reinforce faith. But it made it feel like, oh man, like faith is for girls. Dad's not going, I'm not going. And especially when I got the keys to the car, you know what I mean? Like when it was my choice and I had, I bought my first vehicle, if dad's not going, no way I'm going, like for me, like part of my avoidance of faith was I thought, well, it's not important to dad.
Yeah. I mean, I like one of the biggest problems that I see in our culture today. Well, I mean, so you know a little bit about like the podcast, totally. the company, right? But our mission is like to change the culture. Like that's our mission, right? To change the culture by creating more epic dads. Yep. And to do that as a dad, one of the core tenets is like you have to accept responsibility, right? For everything. Yep. And I agree with you, right? Like myself growing up too. It's funny that you mentioned that like mom was the one pressing to go to church and stuff like that, right? Yeah. Like that was my lens as well growing up. But my dad would attend. But I didn't find out till later on that was really my dad driving that. He just didn't make it known, just kind of in the background. Right. And so I think that's one thing that I've tried to do, with my family is like, is, hey, we wake up late or whatever, we're rushed. It's like, I don't care. We're going, it's like, we're going. That's what we do.
Yep.
And I think that's missing. And that's part of the reason why we've seen such a decline in culture, is the leadership from dads and taking that responsibility of being like, I need to be the one to drive this. And that's something that dads, we give up that responsibility so much to mom, right? And it could be like school, doctor's visits, like everything, just like, hey, we'll just, that's mom's job. It's just my job to provide.
Yep.
And our job as a dad is so much more than just financial provision.
It has to be. I mean, even, you're talking about, school, doctor's visits. Sometimes as dads we'll step in at sports practices, but bedtime routine, bath time routine, like those types of things. Like a lot of times, we want to default that to mom because, I worked all day. And so like, I just need to kick my feet up and I'll let mom do nighttime prayers and things like that. Those are just things that you're right, man. I never saw that modeled growing up, not that my dad never did bedtime routine, but I mean, he traveled Monday through Friday. So, you know what I mean? Like, but he definitely, he didn't do nighttime prayers or anything. So faith was completely relegated to the women in my life.
Yep. Yeah. That's one thing too, man. Like nothing against my pops, and he listens to this sometimes. Right. But like, I don't ever remember seeing him like praying, like ever. No. Right. Yeah. And like we never prayed together, and so that's been one thing that I've tried to do, with my kids is like, hey, let's pray together every night. It's like, it's got to be me leading by example, because if I delegate that responsibility, it's not that I don't trust my wife to do it. Right. But like, that's my job as the father is to lead and like set the example,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially if we want our kids to have that balanced view of faith, that faith is not just the women in our lives, but man, it's as masculine as anything, you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of dads end up being intimidated by the idea of prayer. Like, well, maybe I'm not good at prayer, or I don't know what to say. And so they default that, or they're afraid to be, emotional, or if prayer feels too intimate, it's kind of like we're not in touch with our emotions, you know what I mean? Like as guys. And so we default that over to mom. And yet one of the most powerful things you could do with your kids is just to sit down and talk to God with them. You know what I mean? Like show them that and to set that example. So yeah.
How did you start doing that? I'm interested. Like, how did you start doing that? Like, why did you start doing that? Right. It's like, and I could probably ask a question to myself too, right? Because I didn't have that example, growing up. And so it's like, at what point did you recognize like, okay, this is not mom's job. Like she's going to do it as well, but like, I need to take this on.
Yeah, well, I think because I came to faith late, you know what I mean? Like, so here I am, I'm like 19, 20 years old. I started reading the Bible for the first time at that age. And it was all fresh and like, man, it was all just so raw, and I'm reading it differently than I think maybe somebody who might have grown up in church, and it feels like, feels vacation Bible schoolish, some of the stories, they didn't read that way to me. So nothing about faith at that point when I started following Jesus feminine anymore. You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh man, like all this stuff. And the guy that led me to Christ was like such a dude's dude, like he's got the beard and the work boots, and we're like mowing grass together every day. So that example kind of set me on a trajectory that I knew even when my wife and I got married, I was like, man, I want to model this well. And when we have kids one day, I want them to see dad pray, and I want them for us to go to church together, and for us to have like, not just conversations, for me and my dad, the only thing we could ever talk about for me growing up was sports. So we never talked anything deeper than that. You know what I mean? There was never any conversation beyond, how's the weather, and, Braves look good this year type conversations. And that was it. I mean, we could be in the car. So like, I remember one time we're driving down to Florida, and it's maybe for a tournament or something that, I'm playing soccer at the time. And the only thing we talked about was like the Braves and the Falcons and the Bulldogs. And you're like, man, we were in the car for 6 hours, and we never pushed beyond that like surface level conversations. And I was like, man, I want to have better conversations than that. So some some of my injecting faith conversations and wanting to lead the way is almost a response to like, I'm not going to do what my dad did. Does that make sense?
Yep. Mm-hmm. No, it's kind of the exact same scenario for me, right? It's very surface level conversations, right? And not that I'm taking anything away from my father, like he is an amazing man.
Totally.
And that there's a lot of generational changes as well to where we are now, versus previous generations and kind of what the focus was, right? But yeah, I just want to take the best of what my dad gave me and make it better, right? For my kids, and a lot of that is I want to have those conversations, because one thing that I'd like to dive into kind of after this point is, we are facing, we've got our backs up against the wall right now, like as a culture, I think, right? We see all these stats, that are extremely negative, like crime is increasing, homelessness is increasing. It's a mess out there, right? And like I said, my hypothesis is we need to step up and be men and fathers and lead. But one thing that I struggled with was, okay, what does a man do? Right. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, that's great. But like, I never had those conversations about like, cool, am I being a man right now? And like society and culture, is pushing all this stuff down on us from media and politics, that's not really what a man should be. And so like, I had to do a lot of work about like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? Right. Like to make sure that I'm on the path. And that's where that accept responsibility, comes into it. Totally. And lead courageously, and reject passivity is kind of the three tenets that I see. But I want to know, just from the Bible's perspective, like what is a man, and like what is masculine, and like what should we be doing as men? What does the Bible tell us to do?
Yeah. I mean, well, so there's like, there's the there's obviously like, Genesis account, like back at the very beginning, where you're talking about God creating male and female, giving them roles, giving them, defined, hey, provision, leadership, direction. Hey, you're going to have dominion. This is what he says to the first, to Adam. Mm-hmm. I want you to rule over the creation, and I want you to lead it, and to lead it into flourishing. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think part of our role as guys is to lead, to guide, to direct and protect our families, and whatever it is that we put our hands to guard and to guide that into flourishing. You know what I mean? Like, and so if you think about your role as a dad in a family, like, hey, I am to guard and to guide, to direct and to protect, and to lead, my wife into flourishing. I'm to lead my kids into flourishing. And so you see that all throughout Scripture, is like, man, this is very, very much, like I said, direct, protect, guard, guide. It's even the way Jesus sets himself up by comparing himself to a shepherd. What do shepherds do for sheep? They direct and protect, they guard and they guide. You know what I mean? Like, in order for the flourishing of the flock, right? And so this is Jesus says, hey, I'm the pinnacle of this, and so that's kind of the picture that we get for, like, biblically, what are we supposed to do as men? You know what I mean? And then there's lots of other places you can look where either the Apostle Paul speaks to what makes for good leadership in men. So you can look in Timothy and in Titus, where, hey, he's supposed to manage his household well, make sure that his kids are growing up in the faith, making sure that he's loving his wife and serving his wife. Is he using his strength for service? Is he using his power to protect? Is he someone who pursues righteousness? You know what I mean? Like, is he a disciplined man, not prone to drunkenness, not prone to, and the idea there is like not prone to excess, you know what I mean? But disciplined and measured in the way that he lives his life. Is he someone above reproach? So lots of instruction there of what we're meant to do. But I love the image of, direct and protect for the sake of flourishing. That's what we guard and guide for the sake of flourishing. You know what I mean? Like, our role as men, even just on the earth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we we're just constantly getting battered, right? From, I call it like the Homer Simpson syndrome, right? Of like, this is what's portrayed as what a man is, what a father is in our society, right? This guy that, like, like you said, gets home from work, kicks up his feet, has some beers, watches the football game, doesn't care about his family, all this stuff. Right. And it's like, if we see that everywhere, it just gets ingrained in our mind. And so we've got to kind of break that and figure out, okay, no, that's not correct. What does the Bible say about being a man, and what actually should I be doing? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, another good place to look. You got Ephesians. Ephesians talks about, loving and serving your wife, how to lead your kids, what that should look like, the mutual, give and take in those relationships. It's just another great place to look for how we use our strength for service, but also leading for the sake of the flourishing of the other people. What I mean? So,
yeah. And one word you mentioned in there too that I thought was very interesting is discipline. And so like our company is not like faith-based, right? We're a lot of us are, I am, but what we really talk about is, hey, how do I become a better father? Right. And a lot of that is through being a disciplined person. And specifically, we talk about, discipline in your fitness and your diet and your mindset. But like, what do you mean from a faith perspective in discipline? And like, what are some things like tactically that guys can do to make sure that we're staying disciplined in our faith?
Yeah. I mean, I think so when I'm talking about, discipline, I definitely think, the areas like physical discipline and things like that. Like, I think that's important. I think discipline from the standpoint of, modeling what you hope to see. You know what I mean? Like, hey, does my life image what I hope my kids will be one day? You know what I mean? Like, am I model? And the only way that you're going to do that is through disciplines. You know what I mean? Like, and then I think, when it comes to for me, one of my disciplines or an area of discipline for me is the area of spiritual disciplines. So like you said, not everybody listening to this is faith-based, but I think for me, an area that I practice discipline is in the area of spiritual disciplines. And that's because I know that if I don't prioritize it, other things will just vie for that time. You know what I mean? And I want to have a growing faith, and I want my kids to see that. And so I have to prioritize that, and I have to schedule time for it. And I have to make it a priority in the same way that I have to do with my physical exercise. You know what I mean? Like, so when I get up right now, I do 5 a.m. I get up, and the first 15 minutes for me are spent with God before I check a screen or an email or a social media or anything like that. My first 15 minutes are devoted to God. And that's just, I have a devotional that I listen to, and like, it just sets my heart and my mind in the right place. And then what I'll do is I'll take an observation from whatever I got that morning. I'll text it out to 5 other guys for accountability, because this, there is no discipline without accountability. You know what I mean? Like, so you got to have the accountability aspect. So I'll text 5 other guys, and we all text in, and then I get in the car and I go and I work out, and I work out with 3 of those guys that I also text in the morning. So there's physical, you know what I mean? Like, so there's the spiritual and the physical. And, what's cool is that we're talking about some of the stuff that we read that morning, or some of the stuff we listened to. And, those are just, I mean, again, I look at it and I go, what do I hope my kids replicate one day? And then I try to create disciplines in my life to make sure that my life looks like that. And you see that all throughout the scriptures. I mean, the Apostle Paul says in the 1 Corinthians, he says, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that I don't fall victim to the very things that I preached against. You know what I mean? Like, and so he's going like, hey, I have disciplines in my life so that my life looks like what I preach. And that's what I want to make sure. For me, I look at it and I go, man, I want my wife and my kids to see a person whose life matches the stuff that they preach. And that requires discipline, man. You don't get there on accident.
Yeah. Where you working out at?
I go up to the high school right now. So one of the guys in the group is a high school basketball coach. And so he lets us in the football gym. And so we go in there, man. It's nice. They got all the stuff.
Yeah. Nice, man. Well, I mean, so having that discipline in your faith, that's something that I've been working on, and we preach all the time about like morning routines and things like that. Right. And especially as a busy dad with kids and,
Yep.
and young children, like things are going to pop up. Like you're not always going to have like the perfect morning routine.
Totally.
Like a single bachelor that like wakes up and spends like 4 hours doing a cold bath and all this stupid stuff, right?
Yeah.
But like one thing that's been helpful for me with the morning routine is setting an agenda of like the things I want to do, right? Like I want to get into prayer, I want to get into devotion, I want to get into breathing, exercise, etc. All those things. That's like the agenda. But then stacked right next to that is what is my intention for my morning routine? And so for me, like my intention is to connect with myself and to connect with God in the morning. And that way I know like if something happens and I'm not able to do all those amazing things that like make me feel really good, it's like, hey, I can at least spend like 10 minutes, right? And like meet that intention, And so that's been something that's helpful for me. What is so like morning routine wise, I want to talk through kind of again, selfishly for me, is like what is that spiritual time look like for you? You said it was a devotion, but one thing that I've struggled with is prayer. And really the only thing that has like helped me, with prayer and like getting in the zone, for like lack of a better word, has been like finding the right time to do it and like being primed for prayer. And what I mean by that is almost getting myself to a heightened state. And the best way that I've found to do that has been like after strenuous activity. Because you do physical activity, you're kind of have this high, these endorphins going, right? And then I can kind of, focus in and really, feel like I'm praying effectively, if that makes sense. I feel like if I just am like, all right, cool, I'm going to pray right now. It's like, I can't do that. I got to like prime myself for it. So what are some things that have been helpful for you to make sure that you are getting into that state to have like effective prayer?
Yeah. I would say like for me, one of the most helpful things is kind of having, for lack of a better a layout for my prayer times. I pray through like a similar rhythm. So I have my prayer times like broken up into chunks where I begin with gratitude and I just try to list some things that are top of mind that I'm grateful for. And a lot of mornings it might even be the same things. Hey, I'm thankful for life this morning. I'm thankful for breath in my lungs. I'm thankful for the health that I'm enjoying today. I'm thankful for the provision. I'm thankful for my family. You know what I mean? Like starting with gratitude to me, that helps me. Okay. You know what I mean? Like I'm speaking to God. I'm expressing gratitude. It's getting my heart and my mind in the right place. So I begin with gratitude. I move into submission. So I'll go through some things that I'm thankful for, and then I'll just say, hey, God, today, my mind, it's yours. What I think about, yours. My eyes, they're yours. The things that I look at, let it be pleasing to you. My mouth, it's yours. The words, the conversations that I'm a part of, they're yours. You know what I mean? My hands, what I do today, I want it to be yours. Direct it. My feet, direct me, and my desires, would you direct them? And then I move into kind of an asking, and I'll ask God for certain things. I might even sometimes pull up my calendar and just go, God, I got this meeting today. I'm nervous about it. Or, I know this one's going to be contentious. Would you give me grace for it? And so I'll ask God for specific things. And, in certain seasons, there's bigger lists than others. And then I just kind of, after I ask God, I just kind of invite him, hey, lead me throughout the day. And that's kind of my normal prayer routine. That rhythm to me is helpful. You know what I mean? Like having a flow, because you're right. Sometimes you're like, man, you sit down to pray and you're like, I don't know where to start or what to say. And, there's a person who's sick. God be with them. You know what I mean? Like, and then, I remember when I first started, a prayer routine, I was like, gosh, I feel like I prayed for everything that I knew to pray for. And it was like 2 seconds, you know what I mean? I was like, all right, that was it. Like, I guess that's all I got, And so having that format for me is really helpful in my prayer times in the morning. And sometimes they go longer, and sometimes that takes me 5 minutes to run through, you know what I mean? Like, and so I try not to measure the quality of my prayer times on the quantity of the prayer time. You know what I mean? Giving myself the grace to go, man, I connected with God, and he can do 5 minutes. He can do more with the 5 minutes I gave him than I could do with, 5 hours. So that's amazing that I connected with God. So I'm trying not to be too hard on myself, but I like having the format. Another thing that another thing that I do that I enjoy, there's actually a devotional app called Lectio 365. So for anybody listening, it's a free app, and it's 10 minutes, Lectio 365. And it is literally guided prayer with some scripture reading. It's audible. You just throw your headphones in, you're listening. You got a speaker in the shower. You can, while you're taking your morning shower, you throw that thing on, and it reads scripture. It guides you through a couple prayers and gives you some thoughts for the day. And it's 10 minutes. So it's not super time consuming. So people are like, I don't have time for it. I'm like, 10 minutes, man. Like, it takes you more than 10 minutes to get ready in the morning, So you can throw it on during your even get ready routine. And having somebody else guide some of your prayer can be really, really helpful too. Cause you're like, I don't know what to pray about. And then they give you a prompt and you're like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Cause that's one thing I've struggled with. Like, I think my whole life is like, what do I pray about? Right. Is because, God is, omniscient or whatever that word is. He's everywhere. Right? He knows everything. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, what should I pray for? Cause I used to get so mad, man, in sports. In like high school sports, we'd like pray for the game, and I'm like,
our Father, and
and I'm like, and to myself, I'm thinking like, God does not, excuse my language, like give a shit about our game we're about to play. I'm like, he's got more important things to worry about. But with that though, it's right. At what level do we pray, right? Because we can be extremely tactical about like this one little thing, or do we, is it broader picture about like help society or whatever, right? It's like that's always where I've kind of struggled, is like what actually am I praying for? So I think that can be a good resource, is just using some devotionals, using some guides to help stimulate, some thoughts that you can pray about.
Yes. That's been awesome. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm telling you, like, again, 10 minutes and it gives you a couple little prompts. Hey, pray for this morning, or take a few minutes just to talk to God about this. And you're like, oh, okay, giving you a little guidance for the day. So
yeah. Well, so I want to shift to, again, something kind of selfishly for me is like our kids are kind of the same age.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got 7, 5, girls, and then a boy that's 18 months. And so kind of in that same age range. And one of the things that's been weighing on my mind is really like, what is the age of accountability, right? Like, when a kid is, a toddler or whatever, obviously they're going to lie, they're going to do whatever. And it's like, okay, at what point are they actually going to be responsible for this sin? I'll admit I haven't searched very hard. Yeah. I've had some discussions with people that have differing opinions, but I'd love to know, like, does the Bible specifically talk about this with children? And, because my daughter, is going to this awesome church, Gwinnett Church.
Yeah.
And she's having conversations, she's seeing people get saved. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, when should that happen? Because you're 7. Like, I'm not sure if you totally comprehend, what this decision means, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, I also know as you're getting older, what's right and wrong. So like what, at what point does that cross over?
Yeah. So scripturally speaking, there's not like a verse.
Yeah. It's like when you are 8.
Yeah, exactly. Upon the age, exactly. That talks about like an age of accountability. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, cause in scripture, kids are, pre-Jesus, they're kind of viewed as like nuisance, or like, like what are you even doing? You can't help out with the work yet. You know what I mean? Like, type deal. So what you see is there is in Jewish though, like custom in accountability, if you will. Around 13, you have young boys going through bar mitzvah, and it's interesting, you're talking about manhood. Ownership of faith was equal to stepping into manhood. Part of your rite of passage, which is probably something that our society is missing as well, is like
100%.
For men. Part of a rite of passage in a Jewish culture was a young man or a young woman owning their faith in front of the congregation and in front of the community. So I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to quote scripture. I'm going to let you know that I understand this. And their ownership of faith came along with their participation in culture and society. And that was their rite of passage. It was very much a faith rite of, which is probably why we have that kind of idea of like age of accountability being around 12 or 13. You know what I mean? It goes way back to that, like kind of rite of passage into they're making that decision to trust in Jesus. And so we honor that. We don't do it before, like we're not doing a pre-K, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, I think once they're second grade, we start offering them the chance to go through what we call Jumpstart, which is where we just kind of talk about what it is if they're interested and they're asking questions about, hey, why do people get baptized and things like that. We talk to them about it. And, we kind of basically with the parents, we sit down and we go, can this kid articulate the gospel, why they would want to believe this and what Jesus has done for them? And if they can, then we'll honor that decision. And just knowing though, that there's going to be more conversations along the way. But you're right. Once you're 13, 14, 15, when you're 18 and your sin is more than stealing some bubble gum, you know what I mean? Like, or lying to your mom about eating the M&Ms or whatever, like, and it's come with some real consequences and some heavier consequences. That's why you see, in a lot of church settings, you see a kid that got baptized when they were 8 years old, come back around at 16 and go, I think I need to get baptized again.
Yeah.
And the good thing is we have the conversation. We go, you don't need to get baptized again, but now you do have a more grown up understanding of your faith and what Jesus did for you. And so you might need to recommit, you know what I mean? Like you might need to sit down and confess some things to a trusted friend or to a leader or to a pastor. But you don't have to get rebaptized. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah. So with that, I'm like, man, age of accountability, when are kids responsible for the decisions that they make? When they know that it's right and wrong. You know what I mean? Like, when can I start holding my kiddos at home responsible? And when do they need to apologize and actually own their stuff as soon as they realize that what they did was wrong and they did it willfully? You know what I mean? Yeah. My 2-year-old bites somebody and they're just playing around. That's one thing. My 5-year-old, my 7-year-old, they bite somebody and they know darn good and well that was, then they need to own that and they need to take responsibility and they recognize that. So
yeah, I think it's probably just on me to dive into scripture a little bit more, as well, and get a better understanding. And the part that just worries me, right, is like, hey, I know that they know that what they're doing is right or wrong, right, and that there is sin there. And so what does the scripture say about, okay, if the worst is to happen, right, and my greatest fear is imagined, right, like, am I doing the right thing as a father by holding them back from making that decision because they don't fully understand it yet, and want to make sure that I'm setting them up for success, for lack of a better word, right? So that's really where my mind goes for accountability is hey, yes, they're accountable for their actions, right? As soon as they can realize it's wrong, but like, at what point is God holding them accountable for those decisions?
Important thing for us to remember too is that we look at the outside, the decisions, the landmark moments, did you take this step? And God looks at the heart. And so if you have this is my personal belief, a 7-year-old who loves Jesus, but their parents haven't made the decision for them to get baptized yet, and God forbid there's some tragic car accident, yada, yada, yada. God knows the heart of that 7-year-old. Do you know what I mean? And knows the faith of that 7-year-old. And they didn't need the baptism moment at church. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't need to go through the proper class in order to be received into his kingdom. And if you want scripture and stuff like that for that, you got the thief on the cross, never prayed a prayer, never made a decision to get baptized. He said, would you remember me? And Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise. He didn't jump through any of the hoops. And then you also have King David and his first son with Bathsheba, who does not make it. And that baby dies right after being born. And David says with confidence, he says, I know that child is with the Lord.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And he has this confidence that that baby never got to make decisions like that. And so you look at it and like there's multiple instances where you have, so we can trust a lot of the moments that we create are helpful for us. The baptism moment is it's an outward symbol in the same way that your wedding ring is an outward symbol. But if you took your ring off, or if you're, like my 3-year-old flushed mine down the toilet, like when that happens, it doesn't mean you're not married anymore, So, so I think that's some of the things that I lean into in those moments to remember, so.
Yeah, no, those are great examples for sure. And like I said, just as a father, right, there's such a shift to, it's not about you anymore. It's about, other people, and so that's always something that's weighed on my mind. So I appreciate the examples there. So I'd love to go into also like with your children and being in school age and things like that. Like what does it look like to guide them in faith, knowing that culture is teaching the wrong things most of the time, right? And so I call it like unschooling. Is like, hey, my kids go to school for 8 hours a day, whatever, right? They come home. And it's like, that's great. They're at school, they're learning a little bit, but we go through this process of like, I need to like unschool them, right? Of like, hey, actually tell them what's important, what they should be learning about, and things like that. So are there any things that you do with your kids just to make sure that you're teaching them all these, these valuable lessons from the Bible, like tactically throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month?
Yeah. I mean, something that we do pretty consistently around dinner time is we have conversation at the dinner table, and we go, hey, tell me the high point, the low point, and tell me, something that made you laugh or something that made you, upset today. You know what I mean? And we'll have conversation at the dinner table about that stuff. And usually that's when certain things bubble up. Hey, what'd you learn today? What did you love about today? And they'll talk about, oh, okay, well, talk to me about what does that mean? And that's where we get to have some of those conversations, unpacking. So dinner time and bedtime are like key for me. So those are my two like big areas to like lean in and have conversations. So, at dinner time, it's how was your day? What'd you learn? What was your high point, low point? Something that made you laugh or something that made you frustrated. And then at bedtime, it's how's your heart? How's your heart? Like, is there anything in there that's like, are you frustrated, afraid, any of that kind of stuff? That's when I'm doing my bedtime routine with them. We usually read a book. I'll let them pick a book. Sometimes they want to pick the Bible. They don't always pick the Bible. We'll read other books. You know what I mean? Like, but we'll read a book and then we'll talk about, hey, how's your heart? And then we have a time of prayer. And those are my moments. I mean, just even for example, last night with my daughter, it was we had this great conversation about how to be a great teammate because there's some bullying on her team. I mean, they're 9 and they're already there's already some bullying stuff going on her team where, there's a few of the girls that have played together for a long time that are all tight and they've kind of created a clique within the team. And my daughter, as we're sitting down, hey, how's practice? Like we're kind of talking about some things. How's your heart? And she's kind of going, and I could tell something's bothering her. And the thing that was bothering her is that she's a part of the clique, but she feels bad about it. So now we're talking, you know what I mean? Like that night, hey, well, what makes you feel bad? Well, I got this one girl and she's not so nice to everybody. And I didn't really speak up. Well, why did that bother you? You know what I mean? Like this is kind of your teaching moments, just right there. And man, I'll tell you, like something that I do intentionally is I try to get down on their level. So I'm either laying on the bed with them or I'm on my knees next to the bed. Eye level with your kids. I mean, this is just real tactical, practical.
Yeah.
Face to face with your kiddos. When you get down on their level, there's just something that feels so relatable and so personal. Making eye contact with your kids. And so, and so we have those conversations and then we'll pray about it and I'll invite them to pray with me and we'll pray about that thing, you know what I mean? And we'll bring that to God and I'll even sometimes, they don't know what to say. So I just say, hey, will you repeat after me? Simple prayers, you know what I mean? Like, and so, but yeah, that's some of the stuff, that's some of the ways that we have those conversations and work them into dinner time and bedtime. Those are prompts for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, dinner time's awesome, man.
Yep.
And then I would agree the funniest conversations happen at bedtime.
Yes. Yeah.
Because so like my younger daughter, she hasn't been like diagnosed or whatever, but like she's obviously like ADHD, like to the extreme.
Yes.
And so we have just like the most hilarious conversations at night, you know? And I'm like, okay, good night. Like, I gotta leave. Good night.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so it'll end up being like 20 minutes in there just talking about random stuff.
Yeah.
But it's awesome, man. Yeah, getting another level, right? And just kind of being present. And like one of the biggest things that we get hit up all the time about by guys that listen to the show and are part of our community is like balancing time and being intentional, you know, because like we have so much going on as dads. It's like there's small things that you can do, right, that are going to have a huge impact. And one of them is dinner time, right? Is being present at dinner time and making that intentional time you can have conversation and be present with them, right? So put your freaking phone away. And then not, you know, don't just be like, all right, let's eat dinner. Like have a plan going into it. Like it sounds like you do, right? It's like, hey, every day we're going to talk about the same type of stuff, you know? So it's like, well, yeah, how does your day go? What was the best part? And like what we do is we say, hey, what was your three of your favorite things that happened today, right? And then what was one thing that you didn't like that happened, right? And we talk about that. And then we have what we call our family like identity or family code. And ours is like super simple because our kids are small. So they can remember it. It's the camps are kind, the camps are brave, the camps are strong. The camps do the right things, they do the hard things, they do the fun things. And so like we'll have conversations about that at dinner time of just like, hey, what was one thing you did today that was brave, you know? And just because it like reinforces that identity, right, for them. So and then it just sparks these conversations. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're having this awesome conversation. You're present with your kid. And then same thing at bedtime, right? And so it's like, it's not that hard. You just have to have a little bit of planning. And you have to have the intention to be present with your kid, you know,
intentionality. And yeah, you're right. The presence. I mean, I had something that I try to tell, like, you know, when I'm leading small groups with like young couples and young families and things like that, something I try to tell the guys all the time is that one of the ways you show your kids love is through your schedule. Your schedule is one of the ways that you show your kids love. And a lot of the times we think, well, I work hard, I provide for my family, that's how I show them that I love them. But they don't feel that.
Yeah, that's table stakes, man. I mean? That's your job, like baseline, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And you're like, man, your kids are not going to feel that. It's when you make sure that they're a priority on your schedule and you're intentional, you know, about how you're spending your time. And then, you know, Andy Stanley says this great thing about, you know, choosing to cheat, and you should choose at times to cheat on work for your kids and for your family. And when they see that, when they experience that, when they see dad came home early from work to drive me up to a UGA girls soccer game, you know what I mean? Like, man, that speaks volumes. They'll never forget those moments. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's hard to do, man, for sure.
It is.
You know, and you know, I'm as guilty at it as everybody else is too, right? You know, I lead this company about dads. It's like I'm guilty too, man. I'm not perfect. But one thing that helps, right, is having that calendar, building that calendar, and then prioritizing what's important first, right? And so I know, like today, I'm gonna have to hop off this podcast here in about 4 minutes because I am going to two softball games, right?
There you go.
Yeah. And so like, hey, that's sorry to read. I love our conversation, but like we got 4 minutes, man, you know? And so it's like that, right? It's just like putting it on the calendar, what's important first. But before we do wrap though, so you tell like the most hilarious stories about your kids. Every time you're up there. And it's so relatable. But one that really struck me, man, you know, was it might have been a month ago, 2 months ago, but really talking about like how we just need to be our kid's biggest fan. And it was the story about, you know, your kid playing basketball, right? And like shooting hoops, it took forever. Right. And it's so funny that you told that story because literally like the day before had like the exact same experience with my kid with softball and like hitting her ground balls and stuff, you know? Yeah, man, just so powerful that like at the end of the day, like when we talk about all this stuff about a biblical perspective, being masculine, you know, being a man, but like what our kids need is like, they need us to show up. They need us to be present, and they need to know that like you love them, you support them, and you accept them. Right. When it comes down to it, you know? And so like that story just resonated with me, man. You know, just about like they're down on themselves, but you still believed in them, and that just means the world to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that was, that story came out of the Apostle Paul was talking to a group of Christians about how he had served them, and he used 3 images. And the images that he used, he said, first, I was gentle like a child. He said, I was nurturing like a mom. And then he says, I was encouraging like a father. And you go, oh man, according to the Apostle Paul, dads aren't just the rule makers, but they're encouraging for their kids along the way. You know what I mean? Like, and so there's something about the way that we love and challenge our kids that has to be encouraging. You know what I mean? Believing the best in them, not giving up on them when they want to give up on them. And that's I love that image, and that's what he relates to dads. You know, yeah. So, yeah, man, yeah, that was me and Blakely in the driveway working on the free throws. Yeah,
yeah, same thing, man. We were out in the kind of this like big lawn area in our neighborhood, hitting ground balls. And I made a deal with her. We had this big net set up like by first base, and I made a deal. I was like, hey, you do 5 in a row. Like, you've got to catch it, not bobble it. You got to get a good throw to first base, and it's got to go in the net. Yeah. And I tell you what, man, it probably took us like an hour and a half. Like to get like 5 balls, right? And like multiple crying sessions, and like
that was literally us with the free throws. And I was like, if you hit 5 in a row, I'm gonna get you gibbets for your Crocs. I was like, we're getting gibbets for the Crocs if you can hit 5 in a row. And this, like, the madder she got and the more like tears, the worse she was shooting.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is going to take all night. And then finally she calmed down enough and I was cheering her on, Yeah. That encouragement, man. The other thing with the encouragement is, and I know you got to go, but it is remembering how much our words carry weight and being mindful of the words that we use. I had a moment with my daughter the other night where she didn't want to tell me about a bad practice that she had. And, she'd gotten some critique at practice for soccer, yada, yada, yada. And she hadn't had a good practice and some things she needed to work on. And she, I came up just to ask how practice was. And she buries her head in her pillow and she's just weeping. And I was like, what's the matter? And I remember, through her tears and through the pillow, she said, she goes, I don't want to tell you. And I said, why not? And she said, I want you to be proud of me. Man, sorry, I get emotional because I realized with my words, I had unintentionally attached my pride in her to all the things that she does, not just to who she is as my daughter.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage all the dads out there to remind us that we can't always attach our pride in our kids to the things that they do.
Yep.
But also reminding them that we're just proud of who they are.
Yeah.
Just, hey, you're an amazing young man or an amazing young woman, and I love you because you're my kid. And if you mess up and you totally screw the whole thing up tomorrow, your dad still loves you. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've tried to make sure that I'm reiterating that, not just telling her that I'm proud or not telling my boys that I'm proud of them for what they do, but also for who they are. You know what I mean? So just reinforcing that, man, that's been one of my things that I'm like, like that struck me the other day.
Yeah, no, I mean, our words absolutely have weight, and sometimes even when we think we're saying the right thing, right? Like it unintentionally, it might cause something down the line. Right. And like, example of this is at the table like 2 days ago or something. I even forget exactly what was happening, but my wife had said to one of my daughters, like, oh, you're just so lazy or whatever. Right. And I was just like, no. I was like, you're acting lazy. Right. I was like, I don't want, you to identify yourself as like, I'm a lazy person, and so like little things like that. Right. Just like how we're approaching it with our language. But dude, I agree with you, man. And that's a great thing to do at bedtime routine, is just to make that something you say to them. And that's what I do is I say, hey, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm glad that you're mine is what I tell them, like every night, and that way they're not tying, me being proud of them to some external result, right? Just that I love you for who you are,
Yep. Yeah, dude, that's awesome.
So, well, Reed, man, let's wrap, dude. I'd love to have another conversation at some point.
Yeah.
Dive into some more stuff. Is there anywhere that guys can go, to find out more about Gwinnett Church or more about you, that we can direct them to?
Yeah, I mean, GwinnettChurch.org if you want to check out what's going on at the church. It's also social media, Gwinnett Church, or if they want to find out things about me, read more I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook.
You on TikTok? You got some TikTok videos going?
No TikTok. And I'm like, nah, man, I got out of student ministry. And so I got off all that stuff. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. And then, that's probably the best way to look up stuff about me.
Awesome. Well, Reed, thank you for coming on, man. Awesome discussion. Guys, if you got value from this, drop down below, do two things, leave a review, and then I want you to share this episode with another dad that needs to hear this message. Because there may be something in here that Reed and I talked about, right? That a dad is going through that we have no idea about, right? And they're burying that. And this conversation right here might be what they need to break out, to start making changes. So share it with another dad and leave us a review. Reed, thank you again for coming on, man. And I don't get to say this with many of the guys come on here, but I'll see you at church, man.
Absolutely.
So, all right, guys. Well, that's it. And we will see you on the next episode.